Welcome to the Hollywood Scholar. I'm Jed Morgan, and I just finished House of the Dragon episode 8, The Green Council. And after episode's 5 abysmal nature, I didn't really think that there would be an episode worse than that. But the Green Council may have accomplished it. If this weren't the penultimate episode with only one left, I would be out of this season. I would be done reviewing it because this episode had so many rife issues that I really can't fathom how truly bad this episode was. And it really even tanks below the initial 2 episodes and 5. It was just really, really bad and bloated beyond imagination. There's a search for a certain character that takes up the majority of the runtime of the episode that could have been cut a third of the length, at least. About 40 minutes of the episode was spent on it. It could have well been about 15 minutes long, and it didn't really speak a lot about character. There wasn't even good dialogue in a couple scenes to carry it through, as in the last episode. It really just had so many issues, and this season has done better with Show Don't Tell than other series, but this episode really was like, we're going to tell you everything, we think you're stupid. It was giving me Rings of Power vibes. And for the majority of this season, I feel like a lot of people have been, hey, it's better than Rings of Power. So it's great, and I think that's being a little disingenuous. The majority of the season, I think, has been meh overall and inoffensive for the majority of it. Not a bad way to spend an evening, but this episode still better than the best of Rings of Power, but it still had a lot of issues that drive it quite down in my estimation. But before I get any further, there will be spoilers ahead, so spoiler alert. This episode sees King Viserys' death and the power vacuum created by it, and Alicent and the other Hightowers Team Green making their moves to put Aegon on the throne. And right as all this happens, Aegon is missing, so they have to find him and ultimately get him on the throne by the end of the episode. That's it. Search for Aegon takes like the whole episode. Now, some of it does speak to Aegon's character. Like, some of those scenes are important, developing that he would be a really bad king, though we've seen a lot of that before. So it could really have been cut to quite a degree and not lost anything when it came to Aegon's character. So not a whole lot to praise there. The initial council sequence just switched Alicent's character on a dime. Prior to this episode, after the major time jump, she was a mastermind. She was virtually getting ready to do some evil stuff. She was going to fight Rhaenyra, kill Rhaenyra. She was getting ready to do all these evil things. But now she's just like, I'm a victim. My daddy's being mean. What is going on? Why is no one telling me everything? If that had been her consistent characterization throughout the season, that would have been fine. But it so contradicts what we've seen before that all of her scenes have this bad taste to them that it just doesn't make any sense, not least of which a random foot fetish scene. And Laurie's, when he was first introduced, I really liked him. He had a couple great episodes and one great speech, but I mean, from tagging all the super duper secret assassins with the sigil that he carries around on his staff to this one suddenly has a foot fetish that means Alicent can get whatever he wants from her just by showing her feet. It was just really weird, so it damaged his character as well. The main thing that I can praise, like the only thing that I can praise, is this episode had some of the best music of the season so far. I really liked the initial soundtrack when the search for Aegon began. That went through Rhaenys waking up and seeing everything that was going on. Really liked that soundtrack. And then the music that was done when Aegon was approaching the dragon pit throne that they've set up to be crowned king. I like that music as well. And that moment I did really like, with the pomp and circumstance of the knights like lowering their swords after Aegon passed them by. That moment I enjoyed. There wasn't any talking, but like no one had any good dialogue. There was none. And that's all that I liked about this episode was really the music. And Aemond had become quickly one of my favorite characters after the last 2 episodes. They virtually ruined him in this one. He goes out with Criston Cole to find Aegon in the Flea Bottom, and he just randomly stops in the middle of the street and monologues his entire character motivation to Criston Cole, a person he's had virtually no screen time with. Everything that he said, we could get from inference from the previous episodes. We knew that he was more attuned to his duty. He cared more. From like his scene, like he would be willing to marry his sister if it came down to doing his duty. We saw him being far more intelligent, him choosing his new dragon over his eye, and how vehemently he was training just to be the best in the previous episode when fighting Criston Cole. We could gather all of this, but they're like, no, you're all stupid. We're going to stop this already bloated sequence just to have them map out his character motivation. And then they do that again with Aegon. Aegon being like, I'm not good for king because of these reasons. And Aemon's like, yeah, you're right. It's like, no, we could gather the same thing about Aemond that we did with Aegon. Same situation for both of them, where we could already infer their qualifications and their prevalence for duty to be king, and knew what both of them were thinking in previous episodes. This one, it was all thrown out the window. Even Otto was acting very weird and not as masterminding, and he was starting to do like evil mustache twirling, evil villain giggling. It was some really weird stuff going on with them that I just wasn't into. And more of a minor nitpick, the White Worm's conversation with Otto was incredibly off-putting. Her delivery was so stilted. Her accent was way too thick that she was struggling to get through 5 words and dragging out an already bloated sequence. It was just like, she has 10 words to say. Please say them in shorter than 5 minutes, please. But that was whatever. And then the one action sequence that we got in this episode was a terribly choreographed fight between Sir Criston Cole and one of the twins. It was just full of over-telegraphing your swings, close shaky cams, cutting away as stuff was happening. It was a really terrible fight that really didn't speak much to character beyond the other twin just left and let the two of them fight. He spoke a little bit to him and set up his motivations for the end of the episode. Not really a whole lot. Now, my biggest problem with this episode is the mass murder that happens at the end of it. During the coordination, Rhaenys sneaks down into the dragon pit and retrieves her dragon and bursts forth, killing dozens and dozens and dozens of peasants, just civilians who aren't her enemy. This is setting the people of King's Landing and the peasantry of the Seven Kingdoms against Rhaenyra, because Rhaenys is a staunch supporter of her. So it's like, oh, when the king was getting crowned, this random lady just came in with the dragon, killed a bunch of civilians. She didn't even try to kill the new king or anybody. It was just entirely irrelevant. And from what we learned at the end of the episode behind the scenes, the showrunners are just like, ooh, we need a big, cool moment, dramatic moment for the end of the episode. And we want to show that Rhaenys has like agency in the events that are transpiring. It was for feminism and a cool moment. There was way more wokeness, mainly with Rhaenys, but that moment was like, oh yeah, we just wanted her to be cool and be a cool woman. That was their motivation for it. They're not even considering that she's mass murdering. Now, morally heinous actions can be justified in the story and be good for it when the story, the writers, and the other characters recognize that it was wrong and evil, and if it makes sense for their characters. But Rhaenys has never been depicted as an evil person or one who is capable of an evil choice like that. It's just not what she's been established as, so it's contrary to her character. It doesn't make sense politically because it's going to turn everyone against Rhaenyra, and it's not even the safest way to escape, because we know from the first episode when Rhaenyra landed on her dragon when we met her that there's some sort of like outcropping where they can safely land that leads directly into the dragon pit. Could have gone out that side entrance without anybody notice, without risk of archers or anything, without risk of anything. The only way this could make sense is if she planned on assassinating them. But from what we saw, that was never her intention. So it was just a waste of a scene for a cool girl power moment that ultimately contradicts and destroys whatever point that Rhaenys is trying to make, and is just mass murder at the end of the day. Some really, really heinous decisions by these showrunners. I really hated this episode. We've got slow, endless setup, still no Targaryen civil war, and some really warped sense of morality for a good girl power moment. And it was just some really, really pathetic stuff that I wasn't a fan of whatsoever. The biggest problems with the Green Council can be summed up in the fact that choices have no consequences. From Sir Criston Cole just randomly murdering a member of the small council for a relatively banal statement of, I'm going to keep my oath, and having zero consequences. In fact, he gets promoted after that event. And he's the one who crowns the king, which seems weird to me. There's no consequences to that choice. There's no consequences to the twins hitting the new heir to the throne. There's no consequences to Rhaenys murdering a bunch of people. Choices have no consequences in this episode. Nothing flows together in a logical manner. The dialogue is just explanatory to the 10th degree with exposition, but at the end of the day, choices have no consequences, and so narrative investment is destroyed when logical things don't occur in the way that this show has set them up as they should happen. I think this will be the first episode that I give a 4 or a 4.5 out of 10. I really, really despise this, and if it weren't for there only being one episode left, I would be done after this. I was really hoping that House of the Dragon would be good. I was really hopeful for it after those first 4 episodes. I really don't have hope for it landing well. I mean, the end of episode trailer for episode 10 looked interesting, looked action packed, but so have the other ones. So have other end of episode trailers promised, oh, the next one will be full of action. And then ultimately, that not being the case whatsoever. So I'm not holding out hope that this will stick the landing and end well. But I just, I don't care anymore. Apathy is really setting in with this show that I don't even think I'll care if season 2 comes out in the next 5 years. Like, that's not something I even remotely care about at this point. This is season 7, this season 8. This episode felt more at home in season 8, especially with all the women being like, "Oh, we keep men from being violent." When this episode features that same character mass murdering people, and how season 8 had a bunch of women mass murdering people. They're very contradictory. Whenever they try to make a political message, they contradict themselves time and time again, and it's rather pathetic to see. And terrible writing on top of it makes this a jumbled mess that destroys the few characters that I really like. Luckily, Damon wasn't in this episode at all, so he wasn't tarnished with the abysmal nature of the Green Council. But anyway, that's all I have for today. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Anon. If you like what I do here and want to see good, compelling stories that Hollywood will no longer give you, check out my book series, Odyssey of a Phoenix, a mythological epic about philosophy, morality, and modern-day mental illness issues. Books 1, Down in Flames, and Book 2, Apocalypse Then, currently on sale. Book 3, Kill the Dark, coming soon.